Welcome to the North American Game Bird Association production called Game Bird Spotlight. Tonight we have two guests. One is Randy Dowling, the other is Jeff May, and we are going to talk about how to price your birds. It's a question that has been bothering people, or trying to, just in this industry, we got to figure out how to assess how do you price your product. So I need to remove a couple things and we can get on the way. This has been there are so many things that you learn when you need to do something. I'm going to bring Randy up and Jeff up, and I will take this out, and there we are, all three of us. Guys, can you hear me okay? Uh-oh, hang on just a minute. I have to add, we have one more guest, and it's Jeff's cell phone, which is acting as a speaker for both of them. So fellas, can you both hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, wonderful. We hear you just fine. All right, so we are broadcasting on YouTube and Facebook. We have comments that we can see. Welcome, Brian. Good to have you here. And others, as you check in, go ahead and say something nice in the comment section. If you have a question, ask it. I will bring that up. Our guests will answer. And we will do the best we can to give you the information that you need on this topic. So we'll just jump into this, and I'll ask you fellas a question to lead off. We figure that a bird is adult at 18 to 20 weeks. And we also figure that it takes about 20 pounds of feed to get them to 18 weeks. So what are we mixing to get them to that point? What is it that we need for a healthy bird at 18 to 20 weeks?
Well, two things that you've kind of thrown in there that I like that you brought into the beginning of the subject, because we know feed prices are higher. That's understandable. And my first comment is 80% of the feed is corn and soybean meal. So as the price of those ingredients change, they make a significant impact on the price of feed. I like that you use 20 pounds because that makes the math easy. So if the price of feed is $500 a ton, and it's 20 pounds of feed, then it's $5 a feed per bird on that 20 pounds. And so it just kind of, so you can look at your feed cost per ton and just convert it to cost per bird, and makes it kind of easy. One of the things that I think Randy's going to say, and we're in the same room together, so if you see me looking I'm just looking at him right away. Sort of like
you guys have an unfair advantage.
At the Royals game, you always see them look at each other,
Yeah,
and looking away from the camera. But one of the things, Randy, to talk about how can we cheapen up the feed, Randy?
well, that all depends on if you want a cheaper feed or not. And what I mean by cheaper is typically you're going to have to cut some of your nutrition out, whether it's protein or vitamins, trace minerals, switch to different medications or pull medications out altogether. That's going to be up to the producer to make that call.
Well, I get that phone call, and my first statement is what we want is the best performance. And so we've already created the best cost feed for the best performance. So if you ask to make the feed less, then it's going to cost you something, and that is performance. So really, the answer to the question is no, we cannot make the feed cheaper. We can only hope that the commodity prices do better to help us. So the other side of the equation is, if the feed is going to cost more, how do we move forward to understanding what it's going to cost in a bird?
Okay, now, is this 20 pounds of feed an accurate cost that the bird eats 20 pounds from the day it's born or in the thing up to 18 weeks? It's going to eat 20 pounds, or is that 20 pounds per week, or is that?
20 pounds is an accumulative number. So it eats, like in the first 4 weeks, it'll eat 1.5 pounds. By 6 weeks, it'll eat 2 pounds. By 8 weeks. And one of the things that we can look at is, as the bird, once a bird matures, a mature bird's going to eat about half its body weight. And that's sort of that rule of thumb. And we have to keep these things simple, or we can't. The calculations can be complicated. So like you said, a mature bird, 20 pounds of feed should take about 18 to 20 weeks. That should give you a mature bird. And then from then on, a 2-pound bird is going to eat about 1 pound of feed a week. So that's simple enough that I can remember it.
And you can use it for a calculation. It comes out fairly accurate.
To decide how much we should charge for a bird. So after the bird eats 20 pounds of feed, they're going to eat about a 2-pound pheasant's going to eat about 1 pound a week. So,
all right. And that's the point where we've gotten prices from day-old chick, 6-week-old bird, 8-week-old bird. Now they're fully adult. And after a certain time period, many of us in the industry will charge so much per week and bring that cost to the consumer. So that, hey, you get them by this point, or we're going to charge you because they eat like pigs.
Right. And the important thing is the cost per a pound of feed. If we accept the fact that they're going to pheasant a 2-pound a week, well, in 2020, a pound of maintenance feed was 13 cents. But today, in today's market, it's 24 cents. So it hasn't doubled yet, but it's getting close.
But it's fixing to.
Basically, it's about a quarter a week for you to hold the bird, and that's only feed costs.
Mm-hmm.
The other overheads, and we should talk about that in a little bit later. But right now, the initial cost from 2020 to today is gone from $3.70 per 20 pounds to $6 per 20 pounds. And the maintenance cost has gone from 13 cents a week to 25 cents a week.
Wow.
Those are the facts. And yesterday somebody said, well, what about a chucker? Okay, let's think about a chucker, and the numbers are different, but they're similar in percentages. And a chucker, a quail, a pheasant weighs 2 pounds and a chucker weighs 1.5 pounds. So it's 75% of them. So yes.
And the other one is quail, and quail come out what? They're less than 1 pound, aren't they?
Yeah. So because the quail weighs about 14 ounces, so they're going to eat 7 ounces a week. 1/2 pound.
Mm-hmm.
So those kind of. So again, you got to now. You say, well, Jeff, I'm not sure if you're making it too simple. Well, just see what your feed bill is a week and divide it by the number of birds you have. I mean, it's not hard for you to do this. And then after that's realize that's about half your cost, because all your other costs have gone up also.
Okay, so you just said that's about half your cost. So is that about half of your total cost of producing that bird is the feed?
Yeah, and so there's been a lot of work done in broilers. In broilers, they've come up with 70%, and they've done lots of budgets, and they knew their housing costs and everything like that. But we look at that as one of the major costs in game bird industry is transportation. You've got to bring the chicks in. You got to load the chicks, the adult birds out and move them to locations. So you have a lot of fuel costs and transportation costs.
And that definitely has gone up over the last year. We've seen that. It's coming down in our area, but we have no idea what it's going to do over the summer.
Well, and what we're seeing is like the numbers I gave you, where feed was averaging $370 2 years ago, is now $600 increase, and in the fuel we're looking close to 70% increase. So should we charge twice as much for birds as we did 3 years ago? No, I don't know. I don't know what you can do, but you got to charge a significant amount. And I know people say, well, we can't, they won't afford it, but I'll lose customers, but it's the cost of doing business. I mean, that's what we want. That's what we want to project tonight, that costs have gone up.
And of course, they're sort of relevant to what area of the country you're living in, of course. So, this is just based off of doing some calculations on the markets in our area here in central Kansas. And, so it depends on what part of the country you're in. It may be less, it may be more, but there again, the mathematics on it are pretty simple. Doing a calculation of whether you're going to raise the bird to 4 weeks and then switch over to the grower ration or go to 6 weeks. If you do the math on that, it's only a few cents per bird to leave that chick on a starter ration for an extra 2 weeks anyway.
Yeah, Randy makes a very good point here. Somebody would say, well, I need to switch to the maintenance feed sooner.
You mean the grower
or the grower feed? From the starter feed to the grower feed. And if you take 2 weeks, if you move them from, if you feed only 1.5 pounds versus 2 pounds of starter, you're only going to save 2 or 3, even at $600 a ton, you're going to save 2 or 3 cents per bird.
Well, about 6 cents or so.
Yeah. So 6 cents. Okay. Yeah. So the 6 cents. So do you want to take a chance of compromising the quality of feathers or the ability for the bird to fly to save 6 cents a bird?
Right. The comment or the phrase that I think of is the penny wise, dollar foolish. Right. That there's a false economy to feeding them cheap feed. Now, right. I want to encourage our viewers. We are broadcasting on YouTube and on Facebook. I encourage you to comment. There should be a comment section over to the right. Where are you tuning in from? Do you have questions for either Randy or Jeff? And say something nice. I'd like to know that you're there. Right now, we've been up to different numbers of people checking in. Put a comment over there, and we'd love to hear you chime in on this. So you guys are both in the Midwest. We are more toward the East Coast. We know that the further out we go to the east, the bird prices increase. Going west, they increase. And then we have this center of the country where we're all kind of in the same price range. And that price range depends on where you get your feed, what you're feeding out. You've mentioned the false economy of trying to go to less protein. What is the rule you start out with a pheasant chick that is a day-old chick. What percentage of protein should they have? I've heard 30%. Do you know offhand?
Well, typically we start off with a 28% protein. And then, there again depends on the producer when they want to switch to a grower. Some people like to go with a 25% transition feed and then drop down to a 22%. Some people will feed a starter a little bit longer and start blending a 22% grower with their starter, which actually comes out to, like a transition feed also. So it just depends on the producer.
All right. And for people who are not familiar with terminology, you have something called crumbles, you have pellets, you have other vocabulary on the size of the feed that is coming to the bird.
Yes.
So talk about that for a minute, if you would. What does it mean?
Well, everything that we make as far as bird feed, it starts off on an 1/8" pellet, okay? And then like on the starter feed, it's crumbled down to a real small crumble. And then grower transition would be a large crumble, and then go to a regular full pellet then on the grower after the transition. So typically, the sooner a bird gets over onto a pellet, the feed waste, the feed that the birds waste will go way down.
All right. So if we liken it to trail mix, I want to eat the M&Ms out of it, and somebody else likes the cashews. So they pick those out of the crumbles, but when you have it in a pellet, it's together and nobody can pick out anything.
Right. So the advantage of a pelletized feed or even a pellet that's been crumbled, every bite that bird takes, it'll be a complete feed. So there's no sifting around and picking out the M&Ms or whatever.
And what do they really tend to pick out? They pick out corn because it's got a lot of fat, and then it's like
color's attractive, so if they can see that, they'll pick it out. Those kind of things. So I get that call. I got that call this week. Can I just switch over to mash feed because pelleting costs extra money? And there's two things. One, you have the separation problem. Number two, the birds will actually scratch in the pan. They'll scratch to find the corn, so they're scratching feed out on the ground. So you get a higher waste, and there's actually a significant amount of wind loss. People talk about if the wind is blowing on these outside feeders on mesh feed, they'll see feed, across the pen. So if you see a little bit, there's a lot lost.
Right. I want to bring up one of a comment. Okay, Brian Beaver says, as a producer, I want to raise little athletes. If you try to cheapen your feed cost by feeding grains, you jeopardize the flight and meat quality of mature birds. So if you try to mix and don't give a good blend, you're going to cheapen the quality of your birds.
Yes, and not only that, one of the big advantages over having a manufactured pelletized feed, in the pelleting process, you're injecting steam, which is heat, and that helps release more of the nutrients in the grains in the feed itself. So it's actually a higher nutrition if you would have just taken those same ingredients and left it in a mash type of feed. So you try to get your pellets up as close or above 160 degrees in the pelleting process, which in turn also kills off some of the bacteria that could be in the feed also.
Okay. Well, very good. do you all have anything else you want to add about this? I mean, we know we can't say, hey, on the East Coast, this is what your cost ought to be. What other things you bring into this mix besides the feed? You have transportation costs. You have your raising costs. Are you doing this as a sole operator, or do you have staff that you have to pay? You have electricity, the heat in the brooder rooms, what age? You have the cost of replacement for equipment as well. You can't just say, yeah, okay, this is what it cost me in fuel to take the birds to a customer. I also have to figure in someday that truck is going to let go and I'm going to have to replace it. So over how many years can I get service out of this truck? And we all know all of these automotive companies have had a severe increase in their cost, as well as lack of the truck you want may not be there when you want it. So you need to think ahead. You may have to special order it. If you do, it's going to cost more. Tons of things that are into this mix. And I think it was one of the folks from Pennsylvania that had a whole graph of everything you need to think of to set this price.
Yeah, so you know, in feed manufacturing, we're faced with the same things also. The cost of producing a bird has went up for the producers. The cost of manufacturing feed has went up also. So as a feed manufacturer, we have to look at those costs and work in a higher margin also to cover our costs. So part of the feed cost is a higher margin. It's not that anybody's getting any richer or anything like that. It's just that we have to cover the expenses also of the manufacturing.
Randy, do you contract feed with a producer?
Yes, we do.
All right. And so on that, they would talk to their own feed producer and say, where is it going? What can I get feed for? And by contracting your feed over the next year, say, you would be able to then have a fixed price, you know, that it's going to cost to raise your birds, regardless of what happens with the price.
That is correct. So, and I can explain how things have changed a little bit over the years. As these markets, and I'm referring to the grain markets and soybean meal markets, as the markets have become so volatile over the last 3 or 4 years, it's harder to contract like bean meal further out into the following year. So it's come to the point where at certain times of the year, I can only buy bean meal for, like, say, 6 months down the road.
So you have obstacles to getting something that they can bid on or can contract with.
Yeah, so it's made it more difficult. Used to be we could buy soybean meal in September and October for the following year, all the way through December, or even on into January of the next year, where now the soybean crushers, or they don't know what positions to take, and so they don't want to price out soybean meal too far in advance, and that can that does create obstacles when you're trying to price feed out for the following year.
Well, I appreciate your input on this. One thing that we as the producer need to consider is your truck is coming onto our property and we have an avian influenza epidemic going on. So we want to make sure that we as the producer talk to our feed companies and talk to them about biosecurity. Do not come onto my property without washing your tires, without having your employees sanitize their booths, do something, do not come on my property after you've been on a chicken farm, a turkey farm, another hunt club, another game bird producer. Make sure that mine is just, you're not coming in contaminated. Those are things that we need to talk to our producers, our feed producers about, and make sure that there is a protocol there. Maybe you have a tank on the property that you spray down the wheels so they're not bringing something on, but the driver is just as important. Maybe
Yeah.
there's booties they put on, maybe there's something else they do.
Yes. And you bring up a good point, and it's something that I think needs to be that is what I would really like to see is more of the game bird producers actually have a copy of their biosecurity plan. They can provide to the feed manufacturer and also provide to the drivers. And that way they know what their protocol is. So they're aware also what is expected of them on the farm.
Very good. Okay, we have another question. Are there any new supplements hitting the market soon that might benefit our birds? Any ideas there? We've gone through all the probiotics. Now,
Yes.
I think most people use those all the time. And what other things might we be looking to see?
So one of the things that that I do as part of my job is I watch the industry, the turkey industry and the broiler industry, and I watch and see what they are doing, and because through their high level management, they do extensive evaluations on products. So if they're taking an interest in a product, then I can evaluate that to see if that has potential in the game bird industry. One that we've been watching over the last, say, 5 years is essential oils, and how essential oils or phytobiotics, or they have multiple names, and it's a very noisy environment as far as advertising and marketing goes. But to try to see which ones will have a beneficial effect on the game bird industry and raising a game bird. We have us in something like grapeseed extract that works in conjunction with a ionophore coccidiostat. So we see some synergistic effects there. So they're not no big magic. Put this in and you'll be 10 times better.
Well, isn't it about, like, for a while, echinacea was everything that you should have? I'm drinking some tea that is an elderberry herbal tea. It's supposed to boost your immune system, help you, hey, have your cup today. But after a while, or, pump the vitamin C or whatever it is, it works for a while, then you find out, maybe not so much. But anything we can do that helps.
Well,
I'm sorry, Jeff, say that sentence again. I cut you off.
what we call the diminishing return effect. The first thing has, a lot of effect. The second thing just doesn't have room to have any more effect. So sometimes when you put something new in, you're going to have to take something out. So that's the other part of our evaluation, is see what can we take out that be replaced with something else that's more effective, or that. So there's no major supplement that we can change, but there are subtle, small changes that we keep making over the
All
years.
right, one more question here. Okay, what crops like corn for cover in pens would help supplement feed costs? We're seeing a movement to plant corn in the pens, not only to give cover, but also to give feed. What other feeds might work as cover crops? Something that would be strong enough to hold up in the pens?
Well, I guess I would be a little cautious at certain things. You wouldn't want to plant something that would be potentially toxic to the bird. And I don't know what to suggest on that, but I would sure want to do the research on whatever you would be thinking of planting. That some plants at certain stages, especially in a drier climate, could become potentially toxic to the bird.
Mm-hmm.
And you may end up with sick birds and not exactly know what's going on.
Because they're eating food.
Yeah, and it could be actually coming from your ground cover.
And if you go back to our initial statement, where 35% of, or around 30% of your diet is soybean meal, which is 48% protein. It's the protein that's expensive. And so if you put corn in the pen, and let's say you grow corn and they eat corn, that's only 8% protein. And so I need to make sure I have a good protein, mineral, salt balance for that bird, because I want feather. Go back to Brian Beaver's comment about we're raising athletes. I don't want to put my Super Bowl team on nothing but corn.
Well, it's like kids sitting on the couch eating potato chips.
Yeah,
I have a fat.
Right before game day, I don't want to put them on an all corn diet and then not be sluggish and that, and it's counterproductive to the whole philosophy of what we're doing.
One more question about the corn is, could corn put you at a risk for mycotoxins too? Corn grown in the pens, do we have a problem usually with mycotoxins in those? I know that's been a big discussion point over the last few years about mycotoxins that have come into feeds and not been processed out.
So your toxins start in the stalk of the plant, and then it comes up through the kernel of corn. So there again, in your drier climates especially, you're going to see more of that potential of toxins in the plant, and then again in the kernel itself.
Okay. Well, guys, we have gone a full half an hour. I'm sorry, Jeff. Every time I talk, it cuts you out. Go ahead and say what you're going to say.
We don't have a lot of scientific data, but it's well believed in the game bird industry that mycotoxins have a negative effect on the birds. So we don't use DDGs because of that.
Explain that term. I don't think everybody's familiar with that.
Dry distillers grains have a higher potential of having mycotoxins than good quality corn.
And by that, you mean the grains that are used to distill ethanol.
Correct.
Okay. Very good. So those do not and should not and must not go into bird feed.
Well, and poultry does not process the protein in dry distillers near as well as soybean meal. So, to cheapen up a ration, maybe somebody would look at using dry distillers as a protein source, but it is not going to benefit the bird at all.
Okay, so again, I've heard of people, all right, silly story, but true. At a dairy in Vermont, my father-in-law he would go to the bakery and get day-old bread, and he would feed his cows English muffins and other things. And it's really a hoot to watch a cow eating an English muffin. They don't like butter on it or anything, but they would use that to supplement, try to cut down their cost on feed. I have no idea how it worked and whether the cost got, whether it did any benefit at all. It gave us some funny stories, but that kind of thing of, what do they need? They need good, solid food. It's sort of like the empty calories that are in junk food for people. You're finding something that doesn't benefit them well.
And the difference, a cow has 4 stomachs and they can convert things much more efficiently than a monogastric bird. And so that's the big difference. We can do things in cattle we won't think about in birds.
Okay. Well, very good. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate you being on. I have one more comment that I want to bring to our viewers to remind them about our hunting preserve seminar that is going to be July 18th to the 20th at Deer Creek State Park in Mount Sterling, Ohio. It's halfway between, and try to get this from your perspective, we have Columbus and Cincinnati. It's halfway between, so either airport would be wonderful to fly into. The venue is beautiful. It is a great place to put together a family vacation with this educational seminar. And if you're watching and you are a producer, please encourage your clients that could benefit from this to attend. You can register on the North American Game Bird Association website, which is northamericangamebird.com. The details are there. And again, thank you, fellas, for being on. And we appreciate you all being here. Thank you for our viewers. And with that, we will call it a day.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Done.